Hello, greetings. Welcome everybody to Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast. I'm here. My name is Dayal. I'm here with Achyuta Gopi. How you doing, Achyuta?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I had a little bit of a crash yesterday, not like a car crash, but like we had our Bhakti Center Sicily retreat. I got home on Monday after a long travel, and then yesterday was Tuesday, and was very tired and kind of like ran out of gas halfway through the day, and then had to sleep last night and woke up this morning feeling better.
And I feel like let's call it what it is. It's like that's jet lag
Yeah, you
and,
can call it that if you want.
and retreat leading fatigue.
Yes, yes, those things for sure, because it was 6 hours ahead. I went to bed at 9 o'clock. It was 3 a.m. Sicily time. Yeah, catches up to you
I
for sure.
mean, and actually, that's a natural thing. Like your body's supposed to do that.
Our bodies are not supposed to be traveling at that altitude, at that speed. It's not normal.
Yeah, so I think, giving ourselves a day to integrate or reintegrate is actually kind of normal. We should stop
I
like
normally don't give
crash.
myself a I normally never give myself a day to integrate. My body forces it on me. It's like, please. It's like, and like, I don't need rest. Yes, you do. Like, I'm going to shut down all your essential eternal organs.
That's right.
Like, we are
They force
shutting
fit
this
you. They force fit the
operation
entire time.
down. Yeah, I've gotten to that point. Like, we are shutting down.
Although maybe they'll take the break before your body force quits all the apps because we need you around for longer, my bro.
My body's just force quitting all of the apps. I'm like, maybe if I open up a few more apps, maybe if I start working on some stuff, I'll get more rejuvenated. It's just like, please stop. So, anyways, I'm feeling okay. How about you? Did I already ask that question? Whatever it was, your answer was too short. Your answer was too short.
I'm good. I'm good. I think I've been working on the internal dialogue. So I'm good. I'm good.
Ooh, internal dialogue. Anything specific? Any secrets we should know about?
Yeah, like being more easy on myself. Like I
Hmm.
crashed versus I actually did what was normal for humans and my
Hmm.
what my body was asking for.
And then you feel guilty about it?
I no, I've stopped that. Like let's shut
You're
that
like,
down.
no, I'm past that.
Yeah, we're not feeling guilty about the things anymore.
Hmm.
Just changing how we reframe them.
How do you reframe them? What you said going easy on yourself.
Exactly that. Like, I
Allowing
also would have
yourself that
said
little space.
once upon a time, "Oh my god, I crashed. I can't believe I did that." Instead, I'm like,
Mm.
or that's a normal human function to go to sleep at 9 p.m. after a sixth out, like all of this stuff and leading a retreat and doing all these things. So yeah,
It's never bad to go at 9 p.m. We should be going to 9 p.m. every day.
I remember when quarantine first like lifted and everybody was going back to programs, etc. And the programs were kind of ending at like 8:30, 9 o'clock, like done.
Yeah.
I kind of loved it. I'm not gonna lie, I really did love it. I
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out how to get people to leave at 9 p.m. But I loved having those 5 minutes of that idea. The theory was really nice.
Yeah, we're gonna have to partner on it together.
Yeah.
Um, I was just looking up the Nap Ministry. I'm always quoting the Nap Ministry. I saw something from yesterday. If y'all see some BS story about naps being bad for us, just know I think it's capitalistic propaganda and just keep resting.
I agree. I also think that that is the opposite of like bhakti philosophy. What's the opposite? Mayavadi philosophy. Then that's what this.
Capitalistic propaganda.
Yeah, this anti-nap like propaganda is not okay. I took a nap yesterday and told myself it was okay. I was like, oh, actually, I'm not feeling so great. And then the weather was messing with me, and I was like, I'm gonna take another nap. Nobody can stop me.
No one can stop you. Naps are essential, Lane says. Okay. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We're going to cut it early today
Take a
because we're
nap.
going to go take a nap. Thank you so much. See you next time. Okay, who's still here with us? We should nap when Krishna is napping.
One
Okay.
to four every day, guys. One to
One to
four every
four.
day. God takes a nap.
Oh, Krishna. All right. Well, we're reading the Bhagavad Gita. That's what we said we would do. And we started yesterday with chapter 1, verse 1. And we started to read a couple other verses as we were going into it. The first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, as we know, is um, it's setting a lot of the scene, and it's sort of it's preparing us for this. It takes place. It's a civil war. It takes place on a battlefield, and so it's kind of setting up the characters, and it's going to really hone in on Arjuna's situation of having this extraordinary dilemma, this moral crisis, this spiritual crisis, this identity crisis on all levels. And he's going to have a real breakdown, a mental, nervous, existential breakdown. And the verses we're reading now are kind of leading up to what brings him to that point. And of course, the Mahabharata itself is really the book that explains how we got here. But not having read the whole book and just coming into this first chapter, we get a few verses that sort of lead up, and it begins with Dhritarashtra, who is the king at the time. There's a family. There's Dhritarashtra and his brother Pandu, and it's their two families that are warring against each other. Pandu is deceased, and his sons are representing his family, and they are warring against their cousins who have been very inimical and very um, anti-peace treaties. And so Sanjaya, Dhritarashtra, who's blind, is asking um, what did we determine? He's not a minister. I've always called him a
He was
minister.
his charioteer,
His charioteer, Sanjaya, his
his support team.
charioteer, and was also like a friend and a supporter, and kind of like stuck around, was around him a lot, right?
Support human is really kind of the
Support
best.
human. It was his support human. Um, and asked him, like, everyone's assembled. What did they do? And we referenced yesterday how you made this really beautiful reference about asking questions that we already know the answers to. And he was asking this question, and there was a lot of fear behind it because he kind of knew what was going to come. All of the odds and the omens and the signs and everything was kind of stacked up against him and his family, who were sort of on the side of I don't know the right word, deviance or
Unrighteousness.
unrighteousness, a tyranny, basically. um, but rather than accepting that and coming to some peaceful agreement, which the other side wanted to do, it was kind of like this holding of ground, and kind of like ignoring all the signs that things aren't going to work out. He was ignoring all of the red flags that were pointing in the wrong direction. He was like, what did they do? And then the Sanjaya, the support human, he I don't know the exact Sanskrit for that word, but he was retelling, and he went to Dhritarashtra's son Duryodhan, who was trying to, like, again, also had this sense of things being stacked against him, and was trying to pump up his army by saying, "We got this, we got this, we got this."
Yeah. And, it's so interesting you're saying being against peace treaties. There was a peace treaty, and the other side had rightful land and claims to a kingdom. And they said, look, we'll leave you all alone. Just give us our kingdom back, no problem. Duryodhan's answer is, I would not give you back enough land to fit on the tip of a needle.
That's a small piece of land in New York that would go for about $3,000 a month.
Okay? Like that would be your studio apartment. But also, I mean, when we talk about, when you're saying like there's a holding ground, quite literally, figuratively, this man was really stubbornly sticking to his idea of how things should go, and it wasn't the right one.
Mm.
I
Well,
also I was kind of thinking of when we were talking about Dhritarashtra and this, everybody's like Dhritarashtra, who was the king, and then what always comes before a king was blind king, and I was thinking, I don't want to allow one aspect of my personality to take over and become my entire identity.
mm,
So often we have one aspect of life which kind of takes over and becomes our entire identity. And kind of look at what it does. It doesn't
mm,
really make Dhritarashtra very happy. It's like the one bad thing. He was actually really a capable warrior. He could have been a great thinker. He had no problem understanding philosophy. But this one aspect of him kind of starts to define all of who he is and everything that he does. And it creates this kind of almost like, villain backstory and this
mm.
motivation for everything that he does. And I was just kind of thinking, just look at how this one aspect has taken over somebody's personality. I kind of want to be careful not to let that occur in my life.
Taking on the net. I really appreciate what you're saying. What I'm hearing is that there are various aspects to who we are. Some of them righteous, some of them unrighteous. Some of them things that maybe we're proud of and want to highlight and we should feel good about. Some things that we know aren't serving us or other people, and we need to change or adjust. And some of them are things of our own doing. Some of them seem like things that just happen to us, like born a certain way. Um, and people start to see certain pieces of us, and then they ascribe that to who we are, and then we then have the choice of how we let that affect our own identity. And I take on that identity. People call me ugly, and so now I take that on as my identity, and all the anxiety and shame that goes along with it. Or people call me beautiful, and now I take that on as my identity, and all of the hustle and anxiety of having to keep that up and worrying about, like, the biggest problem I could ever face is a pimple on my nose, because now I'm no longer the beautiful one, or whatever it is, of being rich or being handicapped in some way. And so when we take on that identity, we don't have to let it define who we are, because if we do it grows. Really, Dhritarashtra was physically blind, but he's also um, mentioned to be spiritually blind as well. And it's not something that just kind of happened over time, because he from what I gathered through the Mahabharata in the beginning, he was favorable towards his son. I mean, towards his brother Pandu. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was favorable towards his brother Pandu and didn't feel this, like, tenacity to, like, I have to assert myself to the throne. It grew over time through influence, through negative association, and kind of like adopting this persona that poisoned his mind.
Yeah. And so much of it is and was kind of planned. His wife's brother was not happy that they had married this gorgeous princess to a blind king, which wouldn't have been a problem, but Gandhari was so like ride or die about it that she decided, if my husband can't see, I won't see either. And she puts a blindfold over her eyes and takes a vow to leave it there for life. And so that wouldn't have been such a problem, but she was really staunch about her own
Yeah.
character. And her brother gets upset and then starts to create a lot of familial dissension as a way of kind of like seeking revenge on this entire situation. So there's so many lessons about revenge, about identity, about our characteristics and our character, about living with integrity versus living without it,
Mm.
about what people will do for the sake of their integrity or otherwise. There's so like Mahabharata is filled with so many innumerable lessons. I think it's always a good idea to visit and revisit it.
Yeah. Well, I love, before we move on, I love this. What I'm taking as we read in the future verses is sort of like, because Mahabharata is also filled with characters who are defined by their characteristics,
Yeah.
you know? And so much of what we find later in the Gita, Arjuna's identity crisis. I mean, it's such a big scene. Like, he puts down his bow, which is a big deal because it's like, this is who I am. I'm known as the valiant one. I'm known as the warrior. I'm known as the brave one, the successful one, the leader. And I no longer feel like I can keep that up, and it's causing a huge crisis. And so, what I'm taking from you is this caution to let the way other people see us define us. And when we
And
fall
that's
into that
Krishna.
trap, because what
Yeah.
happens is we start believing it. We start believing it, and then we start becoming it. So we're not that. We're not that, but somebody sees us in a certain way. They start referring to us in that way. We then choose to accept it and believe it. And because of that belief, we start to become that, what we never needed to in the first place.
And Krishna is gonna kind of like poke. He's gonna poke at Arjuna a little bit, especially at the beginning, when Arjuna is putting down this entire identity of his. First thing is Krishna's asking him, "Well, why? Are you actually doing this for a good reason?" Because Krishna is all for it. He's actually, as we find out later in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is actually all for you surrendering that entire identity. But why are you doing this? Are you doing it just because you're scared? Are you doing it just because you think you can't do it? Are you doing it for any good purpose? Is it serving anyone, you included? Krishna's all about service. He's like, is this decision going to serve anyone, especially you, if you do this? And so he kind of pokes him a little bit, and he's like, oh, like how deep does this go for one who has been revered and famous and valued? Infamy is worse than death. And we might think that that's a real strong statement. We're like, oh no, that's not really, is that really a thing? But we see it all the time.
Mm,
People who have been valued and their reputations are it. That is all that they've got. And once they start to lose those
mm,
reputations, we see there's a depression that comes in and anxiety, and they don't know what to do with it. And lots of times it ends in ending one's own life and all kinds of things. It
mm.
takes these drastic forms, and we might think, oh my gosh, that was so drastic, but really it just comes down to the simplicity of even what Krishna is saying. This is the nature and psychology of living entities. For
Yeah,
one who has been famous and valued, and that reputation becomes so much that a moment of infamy is worse than death.
yeah. I Martha was writing, it's a whole life of believing it, and it might take a whole life to undoing it. And I was very much, um, this idea of conditioning, what you're talking about, like when we're conditioned in a certain way, and a lot of our inability or a challenge to express compassion to some people going through certain things is because we have different conditioning. Like when you're conditioned in a certain way and then something's taken away from you, it hurts in a particular way that somebody else may not understand. Like somebody who's very wealthy or very famous goes through the problem, they go, oh, it's tough for them. They didn't get that to happen to them. They lost a little bit of their money, or they didn't get such big on their movie. It's such a bad thing, you know. And you say it in that kind of voice, right? Um, I got I know when I'm getting off track, because I either get certain emojis from Pasha, or I get very strange corrective looks from my wife, who's she's laughing with me. She's looking out for me, really. At the end of the day, she's looking out for my reputation and making sure that I don't fully embarrass myself. But anyways, back to the point of this idea of, but we realizing, like, but when you're in that position, it feels like a death,
Yeah.
because that's the identity and conditioning that you've taken on. Um, and it takes, I love how Martha, I'm kind of shifting points here. It's a whole life of believing it, and it might take a whole life to undo it. You were mentioning yesterday about how many times Arjuna needed to hear this message throughout the Gita and post Gita, you know. It's kind of like, when you have like you go through coaching with somebody and like you finish your sessions and it's like, okay, we're going to set this in place and let's check in 6 months from now and see how you're doing. It's like Christian checks in 6 months later with Arjuna. It's like, oh, actually, I'm still struggling with a few things. I forgot this, I forgot that. It takes time for it to sink in. And I think that that's why we have to set into place or why it's so important to set in some type of daily sadhana where we're hearing every day, whether it's tuning into the podcast, reading on our own, doing our own japa meditation, listening to some other spiritual lecture, because it's like we need the constant reminder, because we're getting reminders other places. We're getting all those reminders of who we are, I think we are materially. Even just going on, you don't have to read the news, just go on social media and people are telling you who you are, the way they comment, the way they like, the way they don't like, the way you're seeing other people's stuff. You're getting these messages of who you are. And when we read or study spiritual literatures, it's like I'm getting a reminder of my eternal spiritual identity. What are you doing right now? I'm reminding myself of my eternal spiritual identity. And it's
Yeah.
just kind of like I need that reminder again and again and again and again until it sinks in.
And we're gonna see this term come up, the false ego, and
Mm,
this is exactly what all of this is. This is the false ego. When we start identifying with all of the things that we have been conditioned to believe that we are by external stimuli or external
mm,
forces. Everybody on the outside is telling us who we are, what we're meant to
mm,
do. We've picked up that mantle, put it on our shoulders, made a whole jacket out of it. Now we're walking around like Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And we are now identifying with whatever outfit that we're wearing. And Srila Prabhupada will mention this so many times. We're identifying with some nationalistic identity or a racial identity or a gender identity or whatever identity it is, a socioeconomical identity. And he's saying, at heart, though, there's a soul.
mm,
And that soul actually has absolutely nothing to do with any of those things except for reestablishing and remaintaining this relationship that we have with the Supreme Soul.
mm. Yeah. I'm going to, just so that we actually read a little of the Gita, I'm going to reread the first verse from yesterday. And also I wanted to read, because I was looking at it, the first paragraph of the purport of the first verse, because I think it speaks a little bit to what we're sharing, and also it gives us another little lesson about what you were just saying in terms of and what we've been sharing a little bit about identities, and really needing to at least be willing to let those go in order to capture the spirit of the Gita and get what it's really telling us. So the first verse again we read yesterday. Dhritarashtra said, "O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do?" Which is interesting. He's saying desiring to fight because not all of them wanted to fight. Arjuna and the Pandavas didn't want to fight, but they were being forced into it. What did they do? And he's asking, like, what did they do? But there's this sense of like, I'm really hoping for a very specific outcome here. And so Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, it's a paragraph, he says, Bhagavad Gita is the widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya, glorification of the Gita. There it says that one should read Bhagavad Gita very scrutinizingly. So there's our word in terms of like regularly, consistently, astutely. Astutely, is that the right word?
Yeah, but also like with questions.
With questions, with
And
intelligence, with
when you
inquiry,
scrutinize,
discernment.
yeah, like and here I really love that word scrutinize because it has this connotation of also even being critical. Like Srila Prabhupada's
Yes.
inviting it. Even be critical.
Yes. But he says, even, and then it's so beautiful the way that he finishes the sentence. He says, with the help of a person who is a devotee of Sri Krishna, and try to understand it without personally motivated interpretations.
Which I think there are like three people who have ever done that.
And none of them are me. Um,
I'm saying, we often get into the situation where we want to prove our point.
Hmm. Well, I think that is when he mentions scrutinizingly, it's saying it's not even the questioning, it's the mood and purpose in which we do it.
Yep.
If I'm trying to like show how much I know, if I'm trying to twist things in a way, I don't want to accept what I'm hearing because it doesn't fit into my idea of what I think is supposed to be, and my ego identity. That's different than questioning because of a genuine wanting to understand, or a genuine confusion, or a genuine like concern of what's being mentioned. So Peter Prabhupada mentions, be scrutinizing, be questioning, bring your intelligence to the table. Don't do it alone. Bring the help of a person who is a devotee of Sri Krishna, who is devoted in their heart, who is pure in heart, who has no selfish motivation, and try to understand it yourself without personally motivated interpretations.
Right. So
Read
it's
the
like,
opposite of Dhritarashtra, who's like, I really, really want things to go a certain way.
yeah. And that's exactly it, be keep your discernment, but put down the ego driven
Yes.
motivations. Keep your
Yes.
discernment, but let go of the woundedness and the ego and all the things that we normally read into things. And truth be told, we show up to so many places with all of the ego, the hurt, the wounds, the this, the that, all the stuff that people have said or done to us. We show up with all that baggage, and then usually we throw all that onto wherever we are, whether it be religion or spirituality or yoga or whatever it is. People are usually showing up and throwing their baggage onto whatever. And so Srila
Yeah.
Prabhupada is saying, show up with it, but don't put your baggage on it. You
Hmm.
can show up, leave the baggage at the door, and then really from a heart-centered space, ask the questions, even if it's about what's hurt you. Sure, ask them.
Yes. Bring your discernment, but leave your ego driven motivations at the door. Somebody write that down. Remind us to pick up there tomorrow, because we never remember it. And I have a story, not a story, but something that came to my mind, a documentary that I was watching, and a story, and something I really wanted to bring up. But if I mention it now, it's going to take too much time. And we're fresh out of time. This was beautiful. Thank you. Kimberly, do you have some takeaways for us that we can give everybody to walk away with?
Yes, I do. So we're taking away today to not let the way other people see us define us, because when we believe it, we become it, and to not allow one aspect of our personality to be our entire identity,
Hmm.
because we have an eternal spiritual identity.
And what do you got, Achyuta?
I'm kind of moving on that same wavelength. There have been so many times where people have been like, but I thought you were like so and so. And then they've come to me and they're like, and now you're not like this. And so therefore that hurt me and I'm just totally offended. And it's taken me a long time to be okay with that.
Hmm.
um, it's okay to allow people to get over their ideas of what they thought I was. And it's also okay to allow time for me to get over all the ideas of what I thought I was.
Yeah. I I I love the introspection of asking myself, what am I bringing to the table that has nothing to do with this instance or relationship right now? What am I bringing to the table from my past, from my conditioning, from whatever, that doesn't actually have anything to do with what's happening right here, right now? And how is that potentially getting in the way of me um, moving forward in a healthy way? So that's just a little bit of a takeaway for me. Thank you guys so much. We love you tremendously. So glad that you're here. Please be well. Take care. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. All the best. Bye bye, everybody.